we're going to have a great conversation here today. I just had the privilege of spending about 15 minutes with Miss Duckett, and we talked about a lot in that 15-minute time span. I'm just excited that she's here with us. I just asked her, if you look at her bio, she is listed that she went to school in the great state of Texas. And I didn't hear a Texas twang coming out of her. And so I asked her, is she a Texan? And she reminded me that she lived there, right? And but she's a New Yorker. And so I could hear that New York accent coming out. So we're delighted to have you here with us. And the audience, as you know, are current CEOs of their campuses. Yeah. They're presidents, and we have an amazing group of leaders here at our institution, and we just want to have a very open, candid conversation with you. And we can start by you just kind of tell us in your own words your journey. I think that's something that we would be interested in hearing from you, because we love using people who look like us as role models for our other students. So, and knowing that you are part of the President's Board of Advisory, and we have some of your board members in here today. We just want to hear your sort in your words.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm just full of joy and gratitude when I see all of you CEOs that are just doing a lot with little. And when I think about my story, and I think about Otis and Rosie Brown, I always say, my dad would always tell me, people see your glory, but they don't know your story. I'm first generation full integration. My father grew up in Alabama. My mother grew up in Louisiana. I'm Texas Bama. I told that to Tina, by the way. And her husband worked at Xerox. My dad, she was like, this is getting scary, for those of you who love Beyonce. But when I think about that, and I think about I was born in the 70s when laws were really coming off books through the hard work of the civil rights movement. And I think about, here I am, a CEO of a Fortune 100 company, the audacity to have this leakage. And so when I think about what led me here, clearly I am very much anchored in my history and recognizing that it was the cooks and the janitors and the secretaries that introduced my melanin and my gender to corporate America. Understanding that the talent has always been there, but the opportunity has not, and still not where it needs to be. Recognizing that my parents did their very best, even when their best was insufficient, it was their best. Understanding financial insecurity, and so I speak publicly about it. Where what it's like when you open up that refrigerator and you see baking soda and somehow, some way there's a meal. Recognizing that your parents, sign you up for karate, and I never got past white belt, yellow stripe because the money started to become an issue. But dreaming. My father told me to reach for the moon because even if I missed, I would be among the stars. And you're talking about a man that worked in a warehouse. My mother is a retired educator. Who did not believe in pseudo praise, who, though she taught in the inner city of Dallas, she would make sure that the students she taught understood what the competition looked like in Highland Park. And she would tell them that this is good, but it is not good enough. And because she knew that there was excellence, and she did not lower her standards. And so I grew up in a family of a lot of love and a lot of laughter. I played sports, so I love March Madness right now. But in terms of the disruptors, when I think about my faith and my family, there were a few disruptors that I think is so important to share. One is the power of information. Mr. and Ms. Patterson told me about a program called Inroads. Without Mr. and Ms. Patterson telling me about a program that I knew nothing about, I may not be here. So I tell people, give away the information freely. Speak your colleges and universities' names out loud. Talk about Thurgood Marshall College Fund out loud. Secondly, the power of advocacy when I did not know what advocacy meant. So when I was going through Inroads, and you all know they recruit on campus, Fannie Mae had one internship position in Dallas. And a woman by the name of Valerie Manning had one job, to find one student. So I'm on the campus of SMU in Dallas, and I'm interviewing, don't know what I'm doing clearly. And Valerie Manning went back to Fannie Mae and said, I found our intern. Her name is Sarah. But Valerie Manning, who was just a recruiter, you get no extra points by adding another expense of an intern. There is no win in that. But for whatever reason, Valerie Manning said, but there's this other girl. Had Valerie Manning simply did her job, or if Valerie Manning simply thought that her rented title would not give her permission to say, but there's this other girl, I may not have started my career at Fannie Mae. I say that because the power of advocacy, before I even knew what advocacy meant, happened. And so the power of information, the power of advocacy started my journey in corporate America. And I share that so much because I want to remind everyone to make sure you see everyone. It was the secretaries when I came into Fannie Mae that took me under their wing and told me the real insights, that would ask me to make their copies, which I gladly did. And then I could ask questions to the manager, what does this mean? It's those individuals that I see every day as I continue to ascend where we are. And it's those individuals that I think about. The last story that I will say that shapes who I am, and to give you a really sense of the person that I am, when I became the CEO of Chase Auto, and you have to put together your strategy, you all know your vision statement and everything. But it was important to me to say, if my strategy is going to work, and if I really want to make sure every employee can go on this journey, how do I start with the people furthest removed from me? So I went to the mailroom. CEOs don't go to the mailroom. But I went to the mailroom and I told the guys, because it was all guys in the mailroom, I told them, thank you. I said, because you do your job with excellence. When a person makes their auto payment, you have to put it in the right chute. If you accidentally put that payment in the mortgage chute and not the auto chute, and it gets delayed, it posts late, they get charged the late fee, they call, they're upset, they end up closing their account, not just with auto, but they close the bank account, etc. So when you hear JB Diamond talking about our earnings, and you hear me talking about our performance, and you hear us talking about the obsession of clients, brush your shoulders off, because you played a role. Those guys pulled up their little pants a little bit, they kind of got a little swag. It was like, you're welcome, we got you. So my point is, so if you're able to connect with the people that would be furthest removed from earnings and show them that they mattered, that's Otis Brown that I see. And I think that CEOs, and many times, many of us as African Americans in corporate America, we don't want to share the Otis Brown story because we believe that we have to get in to fit in, and we need to share new narratives and start with where I graduated from and I got my MBA from. But the reality is that's not what shaped us. It started a long time ago. It started with the people whose shoulders I stand on. It started with the civil rights movement. It started from the riots in the Jim Crow era and the enslavement and everything else. And here I am standing. And I bring all of that into the boardroom. I bring all of that into how I think about delivering financial results. I bring all of that as I think about impact. And lastly, I do all of that to understand that the assignment is clear. I am here because there is impact to be done. There's no other explanation for a girl from Texas that went to Houston and Baylor. I think I'm the first CEO at TIA that did not go to an Ivy League. I'm the first woman CEO at TIA with all of our rich, diverse history. I'm very clear, which is why I've spoken at Jackson State commencement, Quinn's commencement. So at the same time, if I'm meeting with North Carolina main campus, we were at North Carolina Central. It's important that in my early days, that's what meritocracy is all about as a leader, not just in 1 month of the year, not just to check a box, but to understand that the talent is everywhere. The talent's from a girl in Texas who a few people had the audacity to give me some information.
I mean, I just love the story. I mean, you just set the tone.
Yeah.
I was gonna, the last time I did a Fireside chat, the person I interviewed was Senator Kamala Harris. She went on to become vice president of the United stage. Just wanted to put it out there. But tell us a little bit more. You got into it a little bit, and your presence on our campuses, and you're all in. Yeah. So tell us about your experiences going into Jackson State. President Jackson State's right over here. Yes. And going to our campus, and what did it feel like?
Yeah.
And how did it feel connecting with the students, and how did they treat you?
Oh, real talk. I felt a lot of emotion. First, many people will ask, and I know you all get asked the time, Dr. Allen, we talk about this a lot. When people ask why HBCUs and are they still relevant? I think it's the wrong question. When you look at the fact that HBCUs, I think, represent 2 to 3% of all colleges and universities, yet produce 20% of all African Americans with degrees. When you look at universities that continue to do so much with so little, when you disaggregate the data, and we talked a lot about this, and you say universities disproportionately are dealing with first-generation Pell Grant below the poverty line, we do not do like-for-like comparisons when we look at the graduation rates. Because if we did a like-for-like, we would see that HBCUs are outperforming with all that comes with someone who is first-gen and someone who is Pell Grant below the poverty line in our country. And somehow, some way, these students are getting first-rate college education, and they're coming out with confidence and ready to take on the world. We see the STEM performance. So if we're asking the question based on performance and outcome, it is clear you would want to double down on it because of the performance and outcome. So I do think we have to continue to challenge the question. And my answer is clear. It's about performance and outcome. So the question is not why not, how could we not, should be more of the statement in question. So that's my view. What does it mean when you're on campus? On one hand, it hurts because it's a striking difference. Universities that we all know and say their names proudly and celebrate them, when you go to the campus, it's starking on the disparity. So on one hand, that bothers me. Then you meet the faculty, you meet the president, and you would think you are doing fine dining, so it's beautiful atmosphere. The way they come in and the way you talk about your university and the students that greet me and the deans talking about the research and talking about what they're doing. And all of a sudden, some of the challenges with the infrastructure or some of the things that I'm like, why don't they have this and why don't they have that? If they're a little upset, it all kind of fades in the background because now you're dealing with the heart of the university. And then you're full of joy. I'm like, man, I wish I went to anything, right? And then the students. Whenever I'm at a university, my favorite part is talking to the students. And whether it was at Jackson State or North Carolina Central or at Howard, etc., these students, shoulders are back. Hello, Miss Duckett, enunciating the ETT, even in North Carolina, or someone from Texas. And you hear their story. And you understand that they have overcome so much and have so much optimism that they talk about the professors. They talk about what the education meant, which was well beyond the books. They talked about how the university or the college gave them a shot and how they may have been struggling. Or one young lady had a bad car accident, and she talked about how the university, we got you. And so I would say that I come in with deep respect. I lead with a lot of joy. But I also walk away with some fire in the belly because the inequities are very clear and apparent. And I think as a leader, you walk away with what more can we do? I think about going to Jackson State, and it was my first time in the state of Mississippi. I actually saw cotton. So it was like the Matrix, a little bit. And I just think, wow, most financial money centers are not going to Jackson State. But yet I've met the students of Jackson State. And so I do think that there is a conversation that we all have to have in saying at TIA, for example, we're recruiting from all universities. 30% of our interns are African-American from both HBCUs and PWIs. But I do think we have to double down. If we truly believe talent is created equally, opportunity is not. It is not that hard to get on a plane and go to Jackson State. It is not that hard to go to North. It is not that hard. And it's not a decision of a trade-off to say to go to Jackson State, then I'm not going to go to Spelman. The reality is it should be we're going to Spelman and we're going to Jackson State. We should not have a debate on which HBCUs I am going to no longer go to in order to go to these. It should be how many more HBCUs can I go to every year to make sure that I'm really looking across this country to finding the talent and introducing them to being an actuarial, introducing them to cyber, introducing them to finance, letting them see what it means to be a CEO. I think that's the job to be done. And so a lot to say with your question, but I really want to make sure that if an executive is coming to your university and they walk away and they don't highlight the inequities, we missed the assignment. So I do think it's important for us to say out loud the excellence of the college and university in spite of the glaring inequities that you just visually see. And you cannot walk away and ask the question, what more can we do to make sure that the infrastructure is there, to make sure that the technology is there, to make sure that the housing is there, to make sure what more can we do in our own space and place to do our part, to make sure that we can maybe hire one more student that can then have a great salary to be able to get back to the college. So all of that is literally going through my mind when I walk away from attending an HBCU.
Well, what I can say after hearing that response, we are happy that you're on the president's board of advisors, and we're very confident that you will express that to the president of the United States.
I just have to express it to the chairs. Listen, they have, and I do have to give a shout out to Dr. Allen and just the entire committee with President Biden. I can tell you that the work that the team is doing is real. The level of intensity, the level of, we talked a lot about the research that's needed and the work that's coming out with McKinsey report. We talk about the need of infrastructure because you're hearing from the university presidents. And it just requires us to listen, quite frankly, and then to advise the Biden administration of what more can be done based on the resources and tools that they have. And I think the small role that, I play is to make sure that I'm reading the information, show up, and make sure that when I'm in the room, I'm asking the question. I will tell you, there was a meeting with President Biden, and I'll never forget this, and it was with just a CEO. So it was not a Black meeting. It was a meeting that was talking about the economy. And it was like 8 or 9 CEOs. And clearly, it was during the Build Back Better. And so you are talking about, the components of the bill, what that can mean, clearly through my lens of having the privilege to lead TIA and what that means for secure retirement for who we serve. But in that moment, I was like, and I want to commend you, President Biden, for the work that you're doing to historically Black colleges and universities, because we do know talent is created equally and opportunity is not, and that's it. So he then and then he started telling me all about HBCUs and Deltas and everybody else, right? But I think that's how I got invited to be on the advisory, right? But the reason why I share this story to all of you is 2 points. One, when you're in that room and you make that comment, that carries weight.
Yeah.
One of his key leaders, I won't say her name, that was in the room, afterwards, he simply came up to me and she said, "Thank you." That's all she said. And I said, the assignment is clear. Because I understand that for President Biden to create space to fund HBCUs meant that there were other things that could not get in the bill. And that means you're cashing in on the work of people that are holding you accountable. You're passing on the passion, on the focus. But there's things that you did not do that other people would need you to do, and that would be good. And so it's important that we affirm that, because we understand it's not easy and it's not a given, and we know that there's more that needs to be done. And it's important to not just do that when there is the committee, when we're there on behalf of historically Black colleges and universities. It's important when there's just talking about the economy. And I think that is what we need more CEOs to do, is that when you're in that room, are you bringing that conversation into that room? Or does it always have to be an intentional, discrete title name that we're talking about African Americans, or we're talking about HBCUs, and then you bring all of us in the room, but then in any other room, that's not going to make the frontal of a CEO. So I think the opportunity for the BRT, I think the opportunity for us working together is to make sure that in all conversations, it's the economy, student. And in all conversations, if you're going to talk about the economy, you want to talk about equity. You want to talk about meritocracy of opportunity, which means in those rooms, you want to be able to make the plea or what the results and what HBCUs are producing and what more can be done with more support as we think about the overall economy and the future of our economy for our country. And I think that's just important. But President Biden, I can tell you, has been engaged. I can tell you that he's listening, and clearly the work that you're doing and the push really matters, and the leadership truly matters with the CEOs of universities that are here in this room that I get to work with.
Well, I know our CEOs are dying to ask you a question, so I'm going to open the floor for the presidents at this time. If you have a question you would like to ask, please do so. Alabama State over here. What on this down?
My mother is from Thomaston, which is it's still very rural. And my aunt, who's Wyoming Delta, went to Alabama State. No, she went to Alabama A&M. She went to Alabama A&M. And she is like, when I told her the universities that I've gone to, she's like, "And why have you not gone to Alabama A&M? We're calling the president and let her know about my niece." Like, yes, I'm Regina.
We have all rules now. This one, I congratulate you on everything. Thank you for your representation. It's just me. You should talk a little bit more about how you encourage CEOs to engage, because obviously the law made the jump to lead to include all HBCUs. You have the opportunity to engage your other colleagues. All people can say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is, and even talking to you, there is some good momentum. And I think, many companies that are part of the BRT are doubling down and doing more in terms of where they were maybe 5-10 years ago or where they are today. I do think that the more that we share the story of the positive stories of what HBCUs are doing and what they are producing in STEM, talking about the research, talking about the caliber, I think we have to do our part in sharing the excellence, because it's not really Many times we are going to a university and an HBCU is maybe 45 minutes down the road or an hour down the road or an extra flight. And so I do think we have to, as a collective, make sure that we're sharing the insights. And I know that some of the work that we've talked a lot about and just aggregating the data and say, if you really want to talk about performance and outcome, double down on HBCUs. And I do think we have to make sure that we're not just going to certain HBCUs and not others, but we should also not pick those colleges and universities, because the universities that get the most funded are still underfunded. And so I think it has to be a we thing. And I think that being able to have engagements like this with the BRT, I think, being able to make sure that CEOs like yourselves are having a panel discussion with BRT in our regular sessions, the way we bring different politicians in from both sides. I think having that panel discussion where they can see presidents of colleges and universities on a panel, not just an HBCU panel, but just some of the most brilliant colleges and universities in our country with presidents on the panel that is inclusive of HBCUs. I think that goes a long way. And I do think that we have to ask ourselves, and maybe in the report with the VRT, that we are not just saying the number of African Americans that we are, that have internships, et cetera, but we are disclosing the colleges from where we are recruiting and asking ourselves, do we have that geographic diversification as we continue to, double down on our efforts. So I think it's a lot of communication and marketing of the excellence. I think it's also us sharing the transparency of where we are and being able to, understand that there is talent in other parts of the country with students that student will come and work in Dallas or New York or Chicago. We shouldn't assume that student that may be in a rural part of the country getting their education won't go to another state to change their career trajectory.
I really appreciate your authenticity, your story, and I really understand how you connect that to what you do at the end of matters. Thank you. We really together. It's been I am very interested. We talked a lot about internships and pay jobs for our students, because your story reflects exactly what we're talking about all the time. We don't have the opportunity to know what it's like to be in the role. Having that internship, that is the doorway. How do we get more BRT engaged with paid internships across the diaspora of HBCUs? And I absolutely agree. Don't need to fit against the other. There's what a little bit of next businesses, corporations. How do we get more connectivity there? How do we make sure we get that for our students?
Well, the good news, I think this partnership with BRT and Thurgood Marshall and the work that you're doing is a great conduit. And so I think there's a couple of things. I think one, really ensuring that BRT can share more of the capability gaps of where we are hiring. We talked about the 10 million, open roles in our country, but how do we make it real and practical to be able to say, what, I need more cyber individuals. I need actuarials. You're in insurance. There's not enough African-American actuarials. So how do we expose as a BRT, here are the opportunities of what we need? How do we partner with entities like Thurgood Marshall, with all of you, to be able to then map it? And what I've found is, how do we then share some of the best practices? Because the good news is, whether it's Boeing example that you shared with me, or the Apple example, or some of the work that I know that we've done at my prior role and with the leadership of Jamie, and the work here at TIAA, how do we share the stories in a holistic way? Make it real. For example, it's not solely just the internship program. We do an immersion where we bring students into our Charlotte campus for 2 days. We pay the whole nine, and we give them that plant seed. We give them scholarship, the whole caboodle that come to this program. When you're interning, we then talk about financial wellness when they're interning. We may need to bring some of the students, because of the first gen below the poverty line, maybe a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier, before all the other interns that are from some of these universities that are talking about the private equities of the markets because da-da-da-da. And you're walking in like, I barely have a tie. So how do we bring them in a week or two early to make sure, do they have the tie? Do they have the blouse? How do we bring them in to pour on them to make sure that they know they belong? To make sure they do not feel inferior at the start? Because how that translates is if you only have a month or 2 month assignment and a company decided, okay, we're going to open the aperture. And we're going to bring someone in that's been all their life in rural America and attending an HBCU, we're going to bring you to New York. And for the first 2 weeks, you're quiet. For the first 2 weeks, you may be hunched down. For the first 2 weeks, you may not shake my hand. But then you're starting to but then it's over. So then the management team is assessing the quality of the interns. All of a sudden, the brand, and I'm just good at 100. The brand will be, I just don't know if the caliber of the students are the same at this university. They may have some of the technical expertise is not as sound. I do not think they're as prepared. And the reality is we did not create equity in the internship program because we did not understand that if you have students that are below the poverty line, the first gen, they are in certain parts of our country, and you bring them in because they are smart, but then they don't know the rhythm. They're not on beat. And then you don't invite them back. And the real tragedy, and I've seen this, the managers will say, if we have to lower our standards, we'll go and recruit from them. So I just think the job to be done for us as executives in corporate America is to understand fundamentally, do we believe talent is created equally, opportunity is not? Yes or no? Starts there. If we believe that, then we will ask ourselves, how do we make sure that proximity is not the only measure of where we recruit from? How do we make sure that we will go the extra mile to find that talent? But how do we also have real conversation and saying, what's going on with the composition of these students that you all have been able to produce with excellence? And if we bring them in 2 weeks earlier, if we give them exposure to management or our BRGs, our business resource groups that really care, and then everyone else comes, now the clock starts. Now you can see the talent. And so I would just say it's not enough to ask the CEOs to say, hey, go to these other schools, because it comes with some other stuff. And so I do think it's important that corporations understand you're not compromising the talent. You're just acknowledging it comes with a little stuff. And if you could address that in a week or two, outperform. But if you don't, you'll miss the boat. And what ends up happening is a company would say, we used to recruit over here, but we weren't able to get just quite the right talent. So we don't recruit there anymore. And it's almost like the saying in business, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. If you recruit on certain campuses and that student doesn't perform, you never question the entire institution of that university. You just say that was a bad intern. We do not give that same grace. And so I share the job to be done is understanding that. I think the job to be done is saying, what are some of the other elements, which requires us to just listen to you all. And it requires a level of intentionality. It requires a commitment. It can't be sporadic. And I think that we as CEOs should tell the stories of the backstory of many executives in corporate America have come from programs like Inroads or SEO. Many of us have a strong affinity to historically Black colleges and universities. So I think we have to tell those stories. And I think we have to ask corporations to say, keep recruiting here in DC at Howard, and also go to Norfolk State, and also go here as you think about growing the number. So for me at TIAA, we have about 300 interns every year. My goal is to grow the total number And if that means that I add more total interns, that's awesome. But it doesn't mean that I constrain my team to say, well, we're only going to recruit from 4 HBCUs. And so if you want to go over here now, you have to take one away. I think it's more of saying, how do we just each year forge stronger relationships as we understand the capabilities that we need in colleges that can help produce that? And then how do we partner with you all to even give the certification? So if you want to have actuarials, hey, okay, fine. How do you expose them? But there's a test. How do we seed that test before they graduate? How do we say, okay, your senior year, we want to expose you to this and we'll pay so that when you graduate, you already have that certification, whether it's your Series 6, your Series 7, et cetera, that changes the course of your economic earning opportunity at a company, and it builds your confidence because you're coming in the door with already your Series 6. Those are the kinds of things that I think we have to do, and I think it's possible.
I just love Ms. Duckett's answer to that question because of our partnership with the Business Roundtable, because of our engagement with the CEOs. Right now, as we speak, we are sending 45 sophomore students to Cupertino for 3 days, an immersion where they're going to be immersed into it. We went through a process of identifying these students. And I'm going to give you a number here to kind of give you to let you know. When we open up our immersion programs, we just did one at Lowe's in Charlotte, met with the CEO on Lowe's, met with the executive. We had 30 students from 18 of our HBCUs. To get the 30, we had over 300 of our students to apply for the 30. For Apple, this immersion, they're going to be out there for 3 days. We're going to have 45. We had 600 students to apply. So there's so much talent out there that's looking for that, and we're scaling this because you hit it, and those companies that we're seeing are being very intentional about that, and they're coming in, so we prepare them, and it's okay to get them ready for these opportunities. That's what we do at Thurgood Marshall College, so that's perfect. I love that response because you're the spot. We have questions. Alabama 2 back there in the back of us. Let's see.
Questions, I don't know, departure from that. We all have foundations. That you have a direct connect with all the major banking houses. Yeah, I just have to. But certainly have the upward return, share some government security for all of us. We have foundations as well. Some of us sizable, some of us not so sizable. Yeah, ideas on how we can leverage those resources or, kind of get away from this whole 60-40 investment. Can make these cease without return.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's one of those things, if you add up all the endowments here in this room. So to me, I think there's an opportunity to have some of, like, public Naveen, clearly we do endowments, we help manage. I mean, I would love to pull together a group of the CIOs or the CFOs or the CEOs of HBCUs together and say, hey, let's look at this as, and bring some of the folks that are doing this for a living every single day and really look at the investment strategies. Really look at, are there opportunities to think outside the box, to put more money to work that can give some outsized returns. And so I think what I would throw out, and I think even when you think about the BRT is comprised of some of the biggest, banks, in the planet, and clearly we have ours as an asset manager. Why not have a conversation where we're bringing in the investment managers with these CIOs and the CEOs here of HBCUs and have a real working session to really talk about the balance sheet, to talk about the endowment strategy, to imagine that your endowment is $10 billion. What kind of insights and strategies would we have? What is the path to get to 100 million, 200 million, a billion? Where is your vision and strategy, and how do we really think about, what that could look like? I think that's a working session. But I think taking a committee within the BRT and bringing rolling it up with some of our most brilliant minds and really talking about those strategies, I think would be a real intentional next step in conversation. And to also have some real conversation in terms of things that investment strategies, many times are you may own the land, or you optimizing the land, how do you think about the structure? And there's probably a lot of conversation depending on the university to really have that maybe we have not really sat down and talked about it, as well as listened to understand, are there different types of strategies that companies, banking, or their investment companies should be thinking about based on some of the unique needs of HBCUs as it relates to growing your endowment, as it relates to the performance of your endowment. And clearly it's not just 60-40, it's much more sophisticated than that, especially as you think about the environment that we're in, and trying to find alpha right now is incredibly choppy. And I think that will have a real impact, with disproportionate impact with HBCUs whose endowments are not, as large as you would like. And depending on the performance, it could be even down more materially, or have not chased the opportunity when it should have been performing even stronger. So I do think that should be a real intentional opportunity, I think, in leveraging the BRT, Thurgood Marshall, and this group. And I definitely make sure Naveen is a part of that conversation. And if it's not the BRT, I'm more than happy to bring my investment team to say, let's go meet with you all and let's have a real conversation, a working session, not just a presentation, to really look at things and see what we can do better.
We have time for one more question. Look, got Mississippi and Arkansas. So go with Jackson State president, and we'll get you to it.
I heard you mention Jackson State, and I hope your experience
It was amazing.
was. Thank you. I want to talk about that stuff that you talked about earlier in your vest. And I was wondering, I tried to address in my team that stuff as it relates to the students. And I wanted to know if you think it would be better for us to help corporate America by maybe getting a partner to help us with that. Because that stuff that you mentioned is so very important. Because if that's not together, the student doesn't have a chance by the time they get there. So right now, what they do is come to our little workshop, and we talk about we talk about Black dialect. We don't walk in a CEO's office and say things like, what's up, and all of it. Look, we try to deal with a lot of different.
Yes.
In your opinion, is it something we need to continue to do? Get a
Yeah. So here would be an opportunity. And again, thank you for that. I was like, okay, not talk about it, be about it. Every BRT company has a BRG, business resource group, that will have an African-American affinity group, etc. I really do believe that being able to bring the practitioners that look like them to be able to have the conversation. It's almost like I tell my kids everything, they don't believe it. They hear you, oh my God. Yeah. So I think it's also true when, you're really trying to get them prepared. They're like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And then you show up and, they may not be as prepared. Real example. I forget which college. It could have been a PW. It's a bunch of African-American students. So they're in the room. And I'm asking a question. So I was like, okay. And it wasn't a conversation anything more about, let me talk about the investment strategies in it. It was just like, you have 30 seconds to introduce yourself. Let me start. Because let me tell you, in this room, this moment, one of you could answer a question that I have. And the next thing you know, I'm asking Britt, can you go find that student? They were amazing. And then I'm asking you, President, can you tell me? And that person now has a job on the spot because they operated in a way that was a differentiator. So pull up and put your head up and allow me to reintroduce myself. I had every student do that. I got real with them. Some students started crying. So like, listen, you're here at this university. Real talk. Your mom is struggling. You're taking some of your money going back home. You're sitting here talking to a Fortune 100 CEO with $1 trillion under asset, and you swaying back. You're going to miss your shot. You sound like right. So my point is, but here was the beauty of the excellence of the students you all lead every day. It took 2 minutes. And the next thing I know, it was the guys in the room. Wasn't even the women. My name is DeMarcus Jackson, and, I'm a finance major at whatever. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. So now go apply for these internship jobs. And not just come because there was an extra credit or the professor told you to show up. So I say that to answer your question. The answer is yes. It takes a village. I think it's tapping into the BRT, the BRGs, and some of the young talent that we have that are in corporate America to be able, and we will provide that. One thing about the corporations, that is an easy ask because our employees want to do that. To be able to say, I will take 3 of my employees, you're going to go to Jackson State, you're going to work, you're going to talk to the students, you're going to tell them your experience, or we're going to bring them here. That absolutely, because I can tell you the competition is fierce. It is a global market. It is not just competing against finance majors. You're competing against all majors. And you're competing with people that graduated a year before you, 5 years before you, 10 years before you. In an economy that's growing rapidly, your intellectual curiosity, your ability to flex is really your differentiator. So the short answer is absolutely. And I think working again with BRTs and with Thurgood and talking about the BRGs and saying, can we open up the aperture of all of these employees at our companies that want to do their part? Here is one thing they could do. And by the way, you do not have to have a fancy rented title to do that. You could be the first year analyst to go back and give back. You don't have to wait till you're the CEO to really make that difference. Yes, yes, and yes. And I think it will open up the aperture of making sure that day one, they're bringing all of who they are to the table. The one thing I will say, and this is just me, I am trying to create a new chapter of what it means to be a CEO. And because there's not been a big chapter, and I'll just speak for about Black women, there's only been 3, Ursula Burns, the amazing Ursula, Roz, and myself. I believe that when we think about what does that chapter have to look like, we need to redefine it. Yes, you can come into corporate America with your box braids. Yes, you can come into corporate America with your natural, and then 3 months later, you have it straight. And then I'm about to have some boho in that 2 weeks. Yes, you can come in with your culture. Why? My culture is not inferior to excellence. And so I do think that, yes, I can talk about SBA and delivering positive returns. And I can say, like what we're doing. And I do that with my team because I want to make sure that if I am going to be authentic, if I am going to bring the best version of myself, it is my culture. So to be able to be in a room and not have to be confined to this box of excellence, because if I deviate, y'all are going to see me as less than, and you're not going to believe I'm a CEO. They're not going to believe I'm a CEO, even when I'm using big words. So to me, I might as well keep it 100. I might as well come in and say, you know what? I am trilingual. I speak Texan, I'm African American, and I'm an executive. And because I also think about that when you think about people that are first generation to the country and, they feel like they have to dim their accent and they cannot be who they are. They're brilliant. I do think we have to be able to let us breathe. And I do think in our best intention, I think it's generational, in our best intention, because people told me not to wear braids with great intention. But I was like, you couldn't, so I can't. So we will fight for the Crown Act. We will do those things. So I always say that because I do think that the reality is many of our students have that Southern draw, or they have that culture in them. And yes, you have to know how to enunciate. You have to know how to ebb and flow in the environment. But I do not want you to dim their light so much that you then don't have the confidence to think you can ascend because you're a little too culture. I think we have to create new chapters of what it means to be a CEO. And I think it means that, yes, I may have a draw. Yes, I may, put Vaseline on my face because we're about to go to war, y'all. And they're like, yeah, Vaseline, you I can skin right. I say this in meetings. And my team will tell you. And then they say it. Because it gives that reaction. And that is the authenticity of who I am. And I think that that is so important because I want us to bring culture. Because culture is one of the biggest exports in our country. So why are we dimming culture when it comes to corporate America, when it comes to the ability to ascend? And what's happening is many African Americans, especially Black women, are exhausted because we can't breathe. And I think that if we open up the aperture for us to breathe, what I can tell you for sure, and my colleagues here, Mike Teschwan will tell you, the more I am Thasunda, the more he's Mike Teschwan. So to me, the more that we tell these young people, you don't forget where you've come from. You go into that room and you can tell your story. You might have a little sway in it, and that's okay. Because I don't want my son to have to conform to a box that he cannot breathe in, and that therefore he does not ascend in corporate America. It does not mean to be sloppy, but it means that we should not draw correlations to culture means inferior. So I'm probably a little more into that, like, bring the flavor, but there's a time and a place and there's a point of excellence with it. But it should not mean that you can't ascend because, you can't be you. And I think that's, to me, one of the boxes that I just want to break. And I think women have been working really hard to be okay being a woman, and you're talking about your children and all that. And I think men are trying to breathe because men want to talk about that they want to get home early to go see their kids play soccer, but they feel like they can't see it at work. So there's a whole lot going on here. And I think that we have an opportunity to not just make an impact for African Americans, but I think it will allow all Americans to breathe and pack a little lighter. I know I have to go, but I do have to say one thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you have
Oh, yes. One
question.
question.
One more question.
Yes.
Arkansas. I call him Arkansas. Alexander Chris.
Lawrence Alexander, Chancellor's University of Arkansas at
I'm black. Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation here today. It is amazing, truly. And I tell you, it's the best I've heard it. Orleans History Month. I think it's just wonderfully authentic. And thank you, Dr. Williams, for becoming this program. I am coming to you from Pine Bluff, and I thank you for keeping it real today. Pine Bluff is not so easily reachable by airports like Jensen.
Yeah.
There are sins there. So, what can I do to get you to come to Pine Bluff?
Listen, yeah, sure.
And also, related to that, it's related to the last question, is how do we clone the message, clone you, or multiply the message in the gospel to reach all of the people who need to reach our students. And I'll give you the example. I'm thinking, I came to this university 10 years ago from a PWI, from the University of Florida, where I'd spent 22 years of my career rising in the ranks. And I came here, and one of the big differences I saw when I came to this HBCU culture, and I send my students out in my children pages. But the big difference I saw is that the students at the PWI had people around them, whether they were mom or dad or uncle or others, and they had brothers, sisters, people willing and able to kind of shake them up. Sure, they were wrinkly and they weren't all prepared for interviews, but somebody got them ready. And so at the HBCU, in the Delta, in the Arkansas Delta, we need actually that take off over that stuff that you talked. And we need to now groom them and bring them to the place where they are, where they can use their talents, where their talents will shine through. And so is there another, I think you talked about it in your answer to the last question, of multiplying the message so that we can saturate it within our culture?
Yeah. No, I mean, the short answer is it's going to take a lot of work, but yes, I think the reality is a large percentage of African Americans are in the rural South. I mean, like, just facts. And so if we really want to close this wealth gap, if we really want to close the digital divide, we could not just operate where the proximity is right here in front of us. We have to make that extra step because that is where the need is so great and so strong. And so I do think it's an opportunity within the BRT because the reality is many companies are also in rural America. They're moving to the outskirts. They're closer, and they have employees, that look like the students, and they have employees that may not look like the students, but they're co-conspirators. And so they want to help. So I just think that there's an opportunity for us to really understand, if we had a picture of the United States and you had the HBCUs and you look at it by states and you see where is that to the closest proximity of companies that are in the BRT? Like, that's using the data to map into opportunity. And I do think the BRGs, if you think about, if you're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Walmart is huge, and if you activate the BRGs, business resource groups, they all have an African-American business resource group. Say, you know what, it may be at 3 hours, but could we all go there? And they would love it. And so I think it's the data mapping, matching. I think it's the intentionality. I think it's programs like Inroads and others that can talk about the soft skills. That's what taught me about my four, because we had a lot of fours. My dad, like, you want four, that's it, right? Then to understand the force of the spoons and the knife and the etiquette and all that, it's all teachable, but someone has to be the disruptor. So it is a bridge there. And it is, I think, an opportunity to partner with corporate America, with the employees inside of corporate America that would love to go out and take a road trip and engage with students near and far. I know I'm at time, but three things. One, thank you. I am able to be where I am because of the excellence of people like you. Period. See, I brought that period. See, that's period. Thank you for sometimes the days where it feels impossible. Thank you for, with that student that is furthest removed from even seeing hope and opportunity, you held them and you ensured they got through it. The reality is, the students that you educate and their socioeconomic backgrounds, their heaviness is not the exception. It is the norm of who we are. And so what you are doing is actually showing what outcomes look like when you care, what outcomes look like when you meet people where they are, when you don't give up. And that is what you all do every single day. And there are many employees that I've had the privilege to work with at Fannie Mae, at JP Morgan Chase, and here at TIAA who tell that story. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Secondly, as the CEO of TIAA, we are all about secure retirement. It's not just important for us to take care of the students, the faculty, the people that clean your grounds got to put their oxygen mask on first. And the reality is, 54% of African Americans do not have enough to retire. How are we going to close the wealth gap when the daughter that just graduated from Jackson State has to now, who got that $70,000 job, that's probably 67 cents on the dollar, has to split that 4 ways because she has to take care of mom and dad that may no longer be married. She has to take care of herself because, I'm trying to floss. She has to take care of her child. Make it make sense. So my ask of all of you, presidents, one, I would love for my team to have a real conversation to say, are we engaging with faculty and staff to make sure that they are saving enough? Are they not just enrolling? Are they contributing a little bit each day? Because compounding goes a long way. Do you know if your staff is on track? Because clearly the benefits have to work harder because we know sometimes the compensation for HBCUs relative to PWIs are not the same. So how do we make these benefits work harder for you? And do you have exposure to guaranteed income? And so that is a real conversation. Longevity risk is real. Cognitive risk is real. The volatility in the market is real. While I'm in this seat, I want to do my part to address this retirement crisis. 40% of all Americans run out of money. We will not close the wealth gap if mom and dad are not good. And by the way, the young people want to have this conversation. That's the head fake. If our young people are passionate about climate, they can get the retirement conversation. Because if they're not getting it at 20, they'll be part of the transfer of not wealth, but the transfer of debt at 60. And so I want to have that real conversation with you all because many of your faculty and staff are not on track. We return our profits back to our participants. So this is all about the North Star, making sure people can retire with dignity. And I do believe that we have to make sure that our faculty and staff are financially healthy so that they can be able to stay focused on educating and supporting our youth, and so that they can then do their part. And I was at Texas Southern and I was talking to the students at TSU, and I said, if you don't remember anything from this conversation, there's one word I want you to know, and it's called compounding. And I played about, what's the word compounding? I said, the second thing I want you to know is when you get your first job, max out on that 401k or that 403b. Because if you're making $50,000 your first year, on Monday, that Friday before, you was making nothing. So max it out. So that's your new start. Because if not, you're telling TIAA, I'm good with you keeping $12,000 over the next several years. I don't need that money because you're missing the match, you're missing the contribution, you're missing the compounding. These are basic things that if we can educate our young people when they're graduating, if we can bring faculty and staff and students together in a very intentional way, these are some of the basic things that we can do to change the outcome, to make sure when they get the job, they get the wealth. We're getting the job, but we're getting the debt. So those are real conversations that I hope you take me up on in a real intentional way. And we're very passionate about it. You'll see the little flyer, look on the back, like email Craig, email me. Let's have a real conversation about closing this wealth, the gap, and what we can do in making sure that more Americans can have a secure retirement. And finally, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your commitment in the partnership with the BRT and with corporate America, and making sure that you're always advocating on behalf of every HBCU because they all have amazing talent and the opportunity. Every CEO says, we can't find the talent. So maybe we just have to bring all of you to the room with all of us and play the matching game. And I promise you, there are more jobs than students at HBCU. So to me, this is a problem we can eradicate with a little bit of effort and a lot of intention. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you all for taking time to hear me. Thank you.